Welcome back, everyone, to the Wedge 52 Gridiron Podcast. I'm your host, Wedge. Today's episode will be the 10-minute report Cowboys. Before we get into today's episode, please make sure you follow me here on Spotify, as well as on Instagram at Wedge52Gridiron. Also, check out all my other 10-minute reports that I've been posting every single day of July. And, once again, press that follow button here on Spotify to stay updated with the future 10-minute reports that are going to be coming out for the rest of this month. If you guys are unfamiliar, the 10-minute report is where I take 20 minutes of study plus my already established knowledge to create a 10-minute podcast. With that being said, let's jump into today's episode, the 10-minute report on the Dallas Cowboys. Starting off with their two main free agent signings, free agent acquisitions during this offseason. They were trying to get the best bang for their buck. Did not have the most in terms of salary cap room, but they were able to get two solid players via trade. First one of those being Brandon Cooks, a wide receiver. They traded the Texans this year's 5th round draft pick, and next year a 2024 6th round draft pick for Brandon Cooks, two late round picks for a solid receiver, solid number 2 receiver throughout his career. 6 out of 9 seasons in the NFL, he's gone over 1,000 plus yards. Last year, he potentially could have gotten there, but he was dealing with some injuries. In 13 games, he had 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. I would say very solid value for 2 late-round draft picks. You never know what's going to happen with those. As well as they also traded for Stephon Gilmore, who is with the Colts, and they traded a 5th-round pick from the 2023 NFL draft for him. Obviously, he had a little bit of a down year, but Mr. Gilmore is definitely still one of the better cornerbacks in the league. Last year, he had 66 tackles, 11 passes defensed, and 2 interceptions. Stephon Gilmore has performed a little bit better in previous seasons than he did last year, especially in 2019 when he was Defensive Player of the Year. Plus, the trade for Stephon Gilmore will pair up very nicely with their cornerback on the other side of the field, Trayvon Diggs, who has been very good. I think he worked on it some this previous season. But, I know 2 years ago, he for sure, he led the league in interceptions with 11. But at the same time, I think he had most yards allowed when he was the closest defender or something like that. So it was kind of, one up, one down kind of thing. But I think he worked on, that a little bit this season. But last year he had 59 tackles, 14 passes defensed, and 3 interceptions. I did not pull the numbers for yards allowed in 2022 versus 2021. But Gilmore and Diggs should be one of the better cornerbacking units in the NFL. And that should pair up nicely with the Cowboys front 7, who is very solid and potentially top 5 in terms of the D-line, the edge guys. So, but in that box, they re-signed linebacker Leighton Vander Esch. I believe that was a 2-year, $11 million deal. Last year, he had 90 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, 1 sack, and 1 forced fumble. So definitely respectable numbers for a middle linebacker. And then they obviously have, this is the 2 edge guys that I would say are probably top 5 in the league in terms of best pass rushing duo, potentially higher than that because of Mr. Micah Parsons. Last year, Parsons had 65 tackles, 13.5 sacks, 13 tackles for a loss, and 3 forced fumbles. Those numbers were good enough to get him his second first-team All-Pro last season. So he's got 2 first-team All-Pro selections, and he's been in the league for 2 years. So Micah Parsons is an elite defensive end. And then you pair him up with, one of the better defensive ends that we've seen in the NFL in the past 10 years. DeMarcus Lawrence, who last year had 65 tackles, 6 sacks, 9 tackles for a loss, and 3 forced fumbles as well. So those two definitely put up a good pass rush, as well as being strong at defending the edge on run plays. So the Cowboys defense is looking up to be pretty good on paper. Last year, their edge was elite. I expect Parsons to put up those same kind of numbers again. But their defense is looking very solid with the couple additions and re-signings that they had this offseason. Now moving over to the offensive side of the ball, the Cowboys, it's kind of a big year for Dak Prescott in terms of make it or break it, in terms of his future as an NFL quarterback. Dak Prescott's obviously, I guess not obviously, but he's a pretty good quarterback, but always seems to have blunderances or, does not seem to ever take the next step. Kind of seems like he might be maxed out, at least in his situation in Dallas. But last year was definitely a down year for him. He only played 12 games, but he did have 2,860 passing yards, along with 23 touchdowns, a league-leading 15 interceptions, and all of that was on a 66.2% completion percentage. So the Cowboys and Dak Prescott are definitely hoping for a bounce-back year for him. I believe he recently, spoke to the media and said that the expectations for himself this year are less than 5 interceptions. So we'll see. But, a lot riding on him, especially considering I think he's making like $45 million a year or something like that. And they have, I think they've been a first-round exit the past 2 years. But moving on, in the backfield, they have Tony Pollard, who last year had 1,007 yards and 9 touchdowns rushing, as well as 371 yards and 3 touchdowns receiving. Tony Pollard definitely had a breakout year last year, which was good for the Cowboys because Zeke has been on a bit of a decline the past few years and ultimately led to Ezekiel Elliott is now a free agent. So the Cowboys are pretty much saying, or they have said, Pollard's our guy, but at the same time, I'm not sure if Pollard's proven it as much as guys like Saquon, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, but, he will be playing on the franchise tag this season as the deadline has passed. The deadline was Monday at 4 p.m. for players on a franchise tag to secure a long-term deal. And then out wide, they have CeeDee Lamb, who I think CeeDee Lamb is an absolute stud. CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion, might be one of the most underrated elite wide receivers in the league. I hope that he shows out again this season. But last year, CeeDee Lamb had 1,359 receiving yards to go along with 9 touchdowns. That was his 3rd season in the league. Every single year since he was a rookie, the next year, his receptions, his yards, and his touchdowns have all increased. So CeeDee Lamb is a stud. Once again, like I said, one of the most underrated, I think, or at least, he's kind of forgotten when being talked about in the elite wide receiver group. And then they also have Brandon Cooks, like I said, who they just traded for. And then the 3rd starting wide receiver is Michael Gallup, who last year has had 424 yards and 4 touchdowns. Michael Gallup, I would say, has been a solid number 2/number 3 wide receiver on a Cowboys wide receiver room that has been pretty good in terms of talent since Michael Gallup's been, in the league. In the draft, the Dallas Cowboys decided that they wanted to be the Michigan Wolverines, drafting Najee Smith, interior defensive line, 26 overall. He is a good run stuffer, Played in the Big Ten. That's against, good offensive linemen. Big Ten is known for having the beefy boys. But he was still a phenomenal run stuffer. I would not be surprised if Smith starts some games, if not a majority of them, at that interior D-line, one of those two spots. As well as in the second round, they drafted from Michigan as well, Luke Schoonmaker, a tight end. They selected him, in my opinion, to pair up with Jake Ferguson, who will be entering his second year in the league. So it'll be up to those two guys to kind of replace Dalton Schultz's stats, who went to the Houston Texans, if I remember correctly, this offseason. So that wraps up our 10 minutes here on the Dallas Cowboys, which leaves me with just one thing left. And that is my record prediction for the 2023 Cowboys season, where I predict that they will go 9-8. That's all I have for the 10-minute report today. Please make sure you follow me here on Spotify, as well as check out other episodes of the 10-minute reports. Thank you all for listening. Go Ravens.